Welcome to Lesson 1 of Becoming an Effective Facilitator course of the Nonprofit Bootcamp e-learning series. Facilitation is an essential skill for food systems leaders. An effective facilitation requires objectivity, active listening, and neutrality, and it challenges us to move from group processes to engaging discussions and embrace and hear from all members, resulting in successful and tangible outcomes. This course will cover the key characteristics of facilitation, how to structure group discussions, and will give you new tools to add to your facilitator toolbox. Today's presenter is the fabulous Veronica Flores, the Chief Executive Officer of Community Health Councils and an adjunct associate professor at the University of Southern California, Sol Price School of Public Policy. Prior to this, she was the president of Triple Notion, a consultant group providing strategic leadership and capacity building to nonprofits, public health agencies, and startups seeking to scale multicultural social enterprises and initiatives while increasing financial sustainability. For the past 25 years, Ms. Flores has held executive positions in both private and nonprofit sectors, organizations, as well as having a long history of activism on issues related to social justice, equity, and sustainability, and as such has co-founded various organizations, including Bienestar, the Audre Lorde Project, and the California Collegiate Charter School, to name a few. She currently serves as co-chair for the Los Angeles County Community Prevention and Population Health Task Force and on the Charles Drew Medical University President's Advisory Council. Veronica, we are very excited for you, and thank you so much for joining us today and teaching us this fantastic course on facilitation. It's all you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for some of you. Great to be here. Let's see, let's take a hold of this. So we have 30 minutes, and let me just start by saying we have 3 modules that we're going to be looking at. Today is really about understanding sort of the basic principles of what it takes to be a facilitator. Now, as we all know, this is a really difficult stand to take as a facilitator when we, in fact, have so many different roles that we take on, particularly in the nonprofit sector. So today we really want to go through what are those basic principles, but also some understanding about how we position ourselves in a group to really ensure that the group has and can come out with the best content, the best outcome possible. So today we're really going to talk about what does it mean to be a facilitator. You know, there are different approaches, and understanding that there are different approaches to this. And this one should be an important one to all of you, right? Part of it is we don't know the personality types. People come in from different areas, and they walk into a group experiencing different things or expectations. And so understanding who's in the room is critical. And lastly, there's a competency framework that I really like to look at as we think about there's an internal component, and then there's also an external component to really be an effective facilitator. So today what you can expect is that we'll get some clarity on exactly what are those elements that make us more effective facilitators. So does it really work? You know, does being a facilitator really work, right? And so I think part of it is there's an end to this. And so what is that? The role of a facilitator is really for us to design and at the same time coordinate, but it's about the process, right? And so our goal is to really ensure that whatever we do has to lead to one thing, optimizing the group functioning so that we can come out with the product. And then of course, the facilitator, it's a neutral guide. Right? Our role is to never take on a position, but rather support or either move a position or but be an active participant, ensuring that there's a guiding process that the group can take so that whatever you agree to at the beginning of a group, you know, you have to come up with some principles. We're going to do this at this group. This is the purpose of the group, and this is how we're going to do it. And so you stick to that. And it's important that we're really effective at adhering to the principles of what we say to the group is what we're going to engage on, whatever amount of time. So I think the other part is when you think about, what is the role of a facilitator versus a leader? And I think one important part about this is when you think about a leader, right, that is a pretty, a very straight up, right? A leader is someone who will then really take the group to somewhere, right? The group, it's a leader is to turn around and make sure that when you look behind you, everyone is following you. That's the role of a leader. Whereas a facilitator, right, the role is much more about ensuring that the process is, it's a process. So here is the role of a facilitator, right? We have to make sure that as we walk into the room, we embrace all different conversations, that in that process, we have to figure out a way, use tools in our toolbox to make sure that the entire group understands what is happening at all times. We then need to, as different people speak, people walk in with different voices, people walk in with different ways of expressing themselves. It is our role as facilitators to sort of capture that and then put it back to the group in a way that people understand what we're all saying. Secondly, you have to spend a lot of time listening, right? Listening with curiosity, which is very different than just listening. Listening with curiosity really allows you the opportunity to hear what people are saying, and then taking that and then trying to bring it to the group, again, presented it to the group back, so that there is a mutual understanding and people feel like they're gaining something from this process. You serve as the bridge toward consensus. The point of consensus is just, again, process. We reach consensus so that we can add to the pool of knowledge. And that piece is really important. How many times do you go to a group and there's a facilitator who's just not that good, right? And so part of what happens is we start to wonder immediately. You start to wonder and take control in our own minds. Where are they going to take this? Are they not hearing this person is getting upset in the back? I'm not even going to talk anymore because I'm not comfortable with the process. And you pretty much stay quiet and the facilitator never calls on you. So there's a way in which we really have to play that bridge role to support people in their process. So again, understanding where you are at all times is critical. So here now we move into how do we separate and make sure that we're constantly aware that we're constantly in a process of facilitation, and that's it. So facilitation is really about process, right? Whereas presentation is about content only. So we have to look at ourselves and say, are we actually serving this group to move something, or are we being an obstacle by not allowing the entire group to really bring itself to the table? So understanding the differences in approaches is critical. So let's look at this from the perspective of where sometimes we really end up sort of mixing our role. Right? Are we presenting? Are we training, or are we facilitating? Very distinct roles. So when you think about like presentation, the focus of a presentation is on content. Like the one, you may do a presentation about a particular subject you're working on in your organization. The whole idea is that you would then deliver it in a way that provides information, but it's also inspirational, right? You want to get people engaged in your presentation. You want them to feel something from what you're presenting, so, right? And so the approach is about telling, right? You are telling them something that is going to be inspirational, informational, and so really the amount of time that you spend listening here, it's about 20%. Because the critical aspect of this is that you're relaying information that people need to hear. So you're going to be talking about 80% of the time. In a training, on the other hand, the focus is on both content and process, right? You want to be able to tell people something new, or you're presenting on something, but at the same time, you want to make sure that they understand it and learn it. So it's about skills building in this process. So which means you have to focus on process, because that means there are tools, right, that make you a better trainer, so that people really do learn this process, and people have different learning styles. The delivery, again, is about skills development. So therefore, you must develop strategies that are really going to engage the group. The approach, it's about teaching, engaging, whereas now you're talking about a 50-50. You want to make sure that you're telling people, but you want to make sure that you're listening in this other process to ensure that people are learning those skills. Now, here's facilitation and the difference. You only focus on process. There's no content that you need to worry about, right? It is about the group content. You facilitate their content, not yours. The delivery, it's about ensuring that there's group insights, right? That decisions are made, that you can, facilitate a process that will allow for group insight to surface, that you will allow for decisions to be made in a way that allows for buying. And then the approach is really about asking the group, right? What do you need? Where do you need to go? What are the decisions you need to make? Who's in the room? So it's a constant asking to ensure that you understand and you're positioning the group. And then ultimately guiding them through a process so that they get what they ask you to get to. Now, in this case, it's a complete flip from the presentation. Is 80% listening and only 20% telling. That is a huge piece that where facilitators tend to fail, is that they spend a little more time participating rather than just listening. And then telling is really about telling people about the process only. So if we look at, breaking it down to just the two major ones where people really get sort of tripped a little bit, when you're a presenter versus a facilitator. The flow of a presentation as opposed to a facilitation is very clear. It's a one-way monologue, but with facilitation, it's always a two-way monologue. The focus, when you do a presentation, is about us, right? It's about our organization. We're presenting about something, but it's about making sure that we demonstrate that our particular organization has done something and is sharing that information with you. Whereas a facilitation, doesn't matter what organization you're with, ultimately, or who you really are, it's about your skill set. And then your focus is on the participants or clients. The solutions, you have to come up with solutions. They're evidence-based. However it is that you come up with the solutions when you're doing your presentation. But in facilitation, you don't put out solutions to the group, even though you may know the answer. And sometimes, many times we do, but you may not, that's not what you're going to do, right? What you're going to do is make sure that that is co-developed, meaning you can guide the group, right? And you can bring in your perspective as long as you're guiding the group and not influencing the group. And the style, you're speaking, you're demonstrating, again, back to what we said before, with facilitation, you're asking and you're listening. And the tools. A presentation like we're doing now, but this is a training. PowerPoint, brochures, anything you need to help your presentation move forward. On the facilitation, you're also going to need some key elements to bring in. It could be a whiteboard, card, notepads. Whatever you bring in has to represent or support what the group wants to achieve. If a group is asking you to take them through a process so that they can make a decision about something, then you're most likely going to want to bring in a whiteboard and maybe form some small group discussions. A lot of these specific tools and strategies we're going to talk about during Module 2. But at least I want you to see that there's different ways of doing this. Now, here comes the difficult one, right? Because you can be as good as you can, you feel comfortable, you're walking into this group, and ultimately you are going to be facilitating and supporting a variety of personality styles. And you got to keep your cool, right? Always remember that. Keep your cool is a key element of a facilitator. People can scream at you. People can say things. Ultimately, you have to keep your cool, and you have to be able to still move the group through a process. So to do that, I think there are a few things that are really critical here. And this is one of the most difficult parts of being a facilitator. People, right? People step into a group in all kinds of situations. You never know where people are at. You know, something could have happened that morning. They come into the group and they're dealing with their own thing, right? And so they could, which could position them in the spectrum. This, what you see, is the spectrum of change. So when you may not be thinking that you're facilitating for change, but the reality is you will be facilitating for change. Because if you're taking the group from point A to point C, that's change, unless you're planning to keep the group throughout point A, right? So if it's change that you need to get the group to move towards something, then you need to understand the process of change. That will allow you to take a more independent, almost third-party view from the group. Look at people as to where they are when they walk in. Understand that even as you take them through, there are going to be some people in the room who are, you know, what we call early adopters. And there are going to be some people who just, you know, no matter what, they're just going to question everything. And then eventually, right, we want to get to the place where is that curve? And so the minute that you feel like you're getting gradual acceptance to whatever change is happening, that's your time to really bring in your expertise and pull the group together and move them to that final decision, if that's what they're there for. If you're moving a group through conflict resolution, one of the most difficult facilitation styles, you still need to understand the process of change. So this, I think, it's critical, and I don't think we look at it enough when we're thinking about being a facilitator. And remember, not everyone steps into the group with an open heart and ready to learn and hear and contribute. We have to remember that there are personalities, right? So we tend to think in these ways. Well, you know, people say, oh, I'm a type A personality. How many times do you really hear people say, I'm type B, I'm type D? But the reality is this is the spectrum. And we're not all type A all the time. Sometimes we are type C. Sometimes we're type B. So this is sort of an overall perspective. But in order for you to really utilize the information about personalities, you need to understand who these folks are, right? So when you think about the first one you see on your screen, so for example, when you think about a perfectionist, well, that means something. A perfectionist is someone who's realistic, principled, high ideals, but you know, they want this process. They're going to focus on the process. Is it good? Is it perfect? Now, no process is perfect, but they're certainly going to look to you constantly. So those are the people that you need to think about. Okay, here's a perfectionist in the room. They're going to question and watch me all along, whereas you need them to be part of the process and stop looking at you from that perspective. So it's important to understand who's in the room. Then we're talking about an achiever, right? What's an achiever? Well, an achiever is someone who, again, understanding that this is a person that might actually be able to help you a little bit because they're energetic, they're goal-oriented, right? They want to get something done. They're going to want to see the outcome. They may not be as stressed out about the process, but they're certainly going to want to make sure that you get to that point, right? What is the outcome of this? You have a helper. You know, that's a great one to have on your side, because a helper can really think about, you know, they're warm, they're sensitive, they're concerned. So a helper, you know, is going to worry that I don't see everybody speaking, you know, and so they're now going to, you know, Stop concentrating or focusing on what you're trying to do, but start focusing on other people in the room, right? And so we all start to move into the space where you need to keep people focused on the task. The questioner, you know, it's another one of those personalities that they value trustworthy, they're really into relationship, loyalty. So they're very concerned about the entire group process. So the questioner and the helper are kind of in the same place, but except that the questioner may challenge you to say, you know, I don't hear that my friend talking here, or my colleague is not speaking, or they might jump in and say, I want to hear what she has to say. You've had those people in the room. So you want to make sure that the questioner is getting what they need from you. The thinker, it's another one of those personalities that, again, you know, they're very analytical, but they're introverts. And so you want a thinker to participate in your process. You want to be able to ensure that the voices that are going to move the rest of the group are really speaking. A thinker is one of those people. They can move a process, but again, they tend to be introverts. So you want to make sure that you are kind of engaging them. The leader, you know, the leader would want to take over, and the leader is, you know, again, very goal-oriented, and so they want to make sure that this process works out, and ultimately you make sure that you take the group through a goal. The romantic, you know, the romantic is someone that is sensitive, perceptive, but they're very sensitive, and so they, you know, they're going to want to, you want to make sure that they're included, but they may not be able to speak in a way that really says what they feel or what they're thinking. And so understanding that there's going to be a little bit of a mix in messages, it's important. So the peacemaker, again, this is someone who will be focused on making sure that everybody's getting along. And if these are the people who get really nervous when there's conflict. So you want to make sure that you're in control of the conflict, so for the entire group as a whole. But the adventurer, lastly, is someone that can really help you because they're lively, they contribute. Like, this is the folks that are never going to leave you alone, but they're going to be speaking up a lot. So you want to make sure that the adventurer feels comfortable with their space, but at the same time, again, they could take over your session. So you want to make sure that if you're going to know any personality types at all, these are the ones that could be most helpful to you as a facilitator. And you can learn a lot of this, and we're going to go over in the second session, but there are tools and strategies that you can assess a group before you get there, and also at the very start of a group session, so you get a better sense of who they are. Ultimately, this is all around building trust. Being a facilitator, it's about building trust. People may or may not know you as a facilitator, but everyone walks into the room with a level of stress about the facilitator. How many times do you walk into a group that you know is going to be facilitated, especially when there's conflict resolution, and part of what happens to you is like the first thing you're thinking, I hope this person can really, you know, manage this. So it's about managing the group, and so that's trust. And so that means that you have to step into the room being very open and as to what your process is, how you're going to take the group through it. You know, you have to be open and let the group know exactly the process that you have developed and how that process was developed and what you expect to get out of this and what you will do and will not do in the room. So once you establish that the purpose, what your process is, and what you expect from the group, then you need to stick to that. That's the sincerity piece, right? Because then reliability is people are going to expect you to stick to that there's a commitment to the group, right? So that the group continues to have integrity, because it can fall apart in a minute. It takes one person. And that you're competent, and that you're constantly demonstrating your competence in being able to manage the group. That's the consistency that a group needs in order to feel that there's sincerity in the process, and you can move the group to whatever you want as long as that remains. And this slide, I can't emphasize enough, has to be part of what you think about constantly. And lastly, is this facilitation competency framework that I like to talk about, because I think I've just spent the last almost 30 minutes really talking about the external piece, right? And we're going to spend time in the modules 2 and 3 really talking about sort of that external piece. But here is critical, the piece that you have to look at yourself. So when we walk into a group, we need to have self-awareness. The group may be something easy, but let's go with conflict resolution. And it could be a group that you're stepping into that is about some racial inequity, right? And so that's a very difficult conversation to step into, to facilitate, because people have experiences that make them feel angry, apathetic, scared. So you're going to have all the wrong feelings, right? All these really scary feelings yourself as you walk into this group. So one of the first things about being a facilitator, before you walk into every single one of your groups, because this never changes. It's not like you become the best self-aware person and then you can do that from here forward. Every single group, you need to stop and think about, what is this group that I'm facilitating about, and what are my triggers? We all have personal triggers, and how am I going to manage those triggers, right? So here comes self-management, which is, how do I then manage myself when someone says something really stupid about race, and I want to be able to stay in the group, facilitate that, move the group to a better place, and make sure everybody's comfortable. Well, one of the main things is body language. Our body language is critical in how we are in front of a group. Remember, everybody's looking at you, right? Everybody's looking at you, especially when there's real conflict. They're going to their eyes go right at you to say, what do we do now? So make sure that you understand how to manage those emotions. Many times what I do is, when I'm going to facilitate a group that's difficult, I will look at myself in the mirror. Make sure that if I'm feeling upset, what look do I need to have so that I can feel those features in my face as I step into this group, because I know if I have those and I know what I'm doing with my face, I'm not going to promote or let everyone know that I'm also upset about this stuff, because I'm not supposed to be part of this process. I'm facilitating the process. Self-awareness, how to be empathetic with everyone across the board so that you can then contextualize whatever it is that you're trying to get across in the group. All of that really leads us to this relationship management, right? So, and sometimes when you figure all this stuff out, you may say, I can't do this facilitation alone. Like, this is one of those things. This is racial equity. There's going to be issues about this. I think it should be a co-facilitator. So then you get to make decisions before the group starts about what will be most impactful for the group in order to move the process. And if a co-facilitator is the way to go, then that's what you do. And if you need a lot of information about the group before you show up, then you manage the relationship a little bit better. So breaking those two out is skills. Again, it's important, right? We got to have the skills: how to manage a group, how to deal with inquiry, how to design learning experience. All of those things are critical to learning the tools of how to be that. But this, I can't emphasize enough, that your self-awareness and ability to step out of yourself is a very difficult thing to do. And I can't, say, how do you learn that, right? You just have to practice it and be consistently self-aware so that you can do learning, facilitation, leadership, and ultimately impact from every group that you facilitate. So I will conclude this session by just saying, ultimately, we tell this to people, but we have to tell this to ourselves as well. Be patient. And most importantly, because you design a process, you have to then trust that that process will give you the outcome that you need in order to ensure that the group achieves what it's supposed to achieve.